The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the most well-known and touching stories in ancient Greek mythology, embodying the power of love, loss, and tragedy. This story has been widely used in literature, art, and music, and despite its ancient origins, it continues to inspire creators to this day. However, like any great myth, the story of Orpheus and Eurydice is surrounded by numerous interpretations, rumors, and even scandals, leaving room for discussion and imagination. The core myth, a story of love and tragedy. According to the myth, Orpheus was the son of the god Apollo and the muse Calliope, possessing incredible musical talent. He could enchant not only people, but also animals, trees, and rivers, everything living around him. Orpheus fell in love with the beautiful nymph Eurydice, and soon they became engaged. However, their happiness was short-lived. On their wedding day, Eurydice was bitten by a poisonous snake and died. Devastated by the loss of his beloved, Orpheus decided to descend into the underworld to bring Eurydice back. He approached Hades, the god of the dead, and playing his lyre, charmed him and Persephone, Hades' wife, with his music. Orpheus's touching song won over the gods, and they agreed to return Eurydice, but on one condition: Orpheus must lead his wife out of the underworld without looking back until they reached the surface. However, unable to resist the temptation, Orpheus turned around, and at that moment, Eurydice disappeared, forever remaining in the land of the dead. This myth became a symbol of irreversible loss and tragedy, emphasizing themes of love, fate, and human weaknesses. But, like most ancient Greek myths, it contains nuances and diverse interpretations. Legends and interpretations. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has undergone many changes and adaptations throughout different historical eras. Over the centuries, it has been presented in various forms, from tragedies to operas and ballets. In ancient literature, Orpheus was depicted as a symbol of art, capable of conquering even death with his music. His journey to the underworld became a metaphor for humanity's attempt to transcend boundaries and reclaim what has been lost. There are also several variations of the myth. In some versions, Eurydice does not die from a snake bite, but from another cause, such as the malice of the gods or a random accident. In other versions, Orpheus not only loses Eurydice, but also becomes a victim of a tragic fate himself, such as being killed by vengeful women. The Maenads, followers of Dionysus. Rumors and mystifications. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has given rise to many rumors and myths, which were likely sparked by later interpretations. One of the most popular versions concerns the idea that after the loss of Eurydice, Orpheus became completely estranged from women. Some traditions say that after the tragedy, Orpheus dedicated himself entirely to music and refused to love again. This led to rumors that he even began to preach against love and women. As a result, his harsh and reclusive behavior allegedly led to his death at the hands of the Maenads, who tore him apart. This aspect of Orpheus' story also highlights broader themes of how tragedy and loss can change a person and their view of the world. In later interpretations, Orpheus is often portrayed as someone who seeks to rid himself of all passion, which in turn symbolizes the complex relationship between art and emotions. Scandals and misunderstandings. Like any iconic story, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice has not been free from scandals. One of the scandals revolves around the question of who was actually to blame for Eurydice's tragic loss. Some interpretations suggest that the myth is a tale about Orpheus's weakness, as he failed to withstand the test and could not resist the temptation of looking back. Others argue that Eurydice herself was to blame for their fate, as she was unable to wait, and in the moment Orpheus looked back, she became part of the myth. There is also the opinion that the myth of Orpheus returning to the land of the dead and his subsequent departure from life is a kind of symbol reflecting the ancient Greek ideas of the inevitability of fate and how love can be a destructive force. This view is often criticized for attributing too much tragedy to Orpheus and Eurydice, rather than emphasizing their heroism and willpower. Conclusion. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of those stories that goes to the deepest layers of the human soul, exploring themes of love, loss, fate, and redemption. This story from ancient Greece continues to be relevant and inspires artists, musicians, and writers across the centuries. It is important to note that in this myth, there are no clear-cut heroes or villains, but only human emotions and feelings, which sometimes lead to tragedy, but always leave room for new interpretations and reflections.